Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we're doing something really fascinating. We're going to completely unpack the architecture of a modern media critique. We'll be mapping out the exact step-by-step arguments from a highly passionate commentary on a recent, pretty heated political interview between Donald Trump and Kristen Welker. Now, just to be super clear up front, we aren't here to take sides at all. We're just here to understand exactly how these arguments are built by the source and, what they reveal about the deep divisions in journalism today. Okay, let's just dive right in with this intense, direct quote from the source. "I've just had enough with these holier-than-thou megalomaniacs who call themselves journalists." Wow, so this immediately establishes a very confrontational stance toward mainstream journalism, right? The commentator isn't holding back even a little bit here. They're framing the media not as these neutral, objective observers, but as an arrogant, totally out-of-touch elite. And this really sets the emotional and thematic baseline for their entire critique of the interview. To keep us on track, here is our roadmap for today. We'll be looking at 1. The press on trial. 2. Debating election integrity. 3. Justice and January 6th. 4. Anatomy of an interview. 5. The media disconnect. And finally, 6. The demand for transparency. Let's get into it. Starting off with Section 1. The press on trial. Assessing honest curiosity. So, here is the core, really deeply critical thesis from the source. They say modern journalists have completely abandoned honest curiosity. The critique argues that instead of listening to an answer and genuinely adjusting their perspective, today's interviewer is entirely driven by a preset narrative. It's like they're just hunting for specific sound bites that confirm what they already believe, rather than actually pausing to see if an opposing viewpoint makes any sense at all. Moving right along to Section 2, debating election integrity. What gets ignored? According to the commentary, there is a massive, glaring double standard at play here. The source argues that journalists will relentlessly demand hard evidence of widespread election rigging, but at the exact same time, they'll just wave away these tangible, logistical messes unfolding right in front of them across the country. We're talking specific callouts here, like bloated voter rolls, ballots showing up days late, major chain of custody black holes, and the kind of extreme counting delays we've seen in places like California. The argument is essentially that the press willfully ignores these issues because, well, acknowledging them would totally conflict with their established narrative. All right, Section 3, Justice and January 6th, the plea deal dilemma. Now, a major point of contention centers on how the media characterizes Trump's stance on the January 6 defendants. The commentary asserts that Trump was actually just asking for basic due process. Specifically, he was calling for a panel to review these cases one by one, looking at the individual facts. The critique here is that the media framed him as this wild bomb thrower demanding blanket pardons for everyone, completely ignoring his actual plea for just standard individualized justice. Now, you might be wondering, well, if these defendants were innocent, why did so many of them plead guilty? The interviewer actually shot back with this exact question. And on its face, it seems like a pretty straightforward counter, right? But the commentator uses this specific question to illustrate what they see as a profound ignorance of how the legal system actually functions in practice. And they map out this terrifying step-by-step sequence to explain exactly why a perfectly innocent person might legally surrender to an all-powerful federal government. Picture this. Normal people suddenly facing midnight arrests by federal agents, being held in solitary confinement, and totally denied access to legal counsel. By the time they actually get to a lawyer, they're offered a brutal calculus. Take a 2-year plea deal right now, or roll the dice on a trial that could put you away for 25 years to life. To make this abstract legal concept feel incredibly tangible, the source uses this great microstory of standard corporate legal advice. They argued that the judicial process itself has literally become the punishment. Like, haven't you ever spoken to a lawyer? Because in the real world, every single corporate lawyer will tell you to just settle it, just make it go away, it's not worth it. They advise this regardless of your actual guilt, simply because fighting the system is just way too risky and destructive. Let's jump to Section 4, Anatomy of an Interview, behind the scenes in Wisconsin. The commentator constructs this timeline to visually undercut the mainstream claim that there was some sort of dangerous meltdown. Notice the stark contrast here. According to the source, Trump actually invited the network, waited an hour in a pounding thunderstorm just for their audio equipment to work, and then, after facing 2 solid hours of relentless, hostile badgering, he politely ended the interview and walked out. The real kicker? They note he actually reached out on Saturday to apologize for being cranky about the rain delays and even agreed to a follow-up. So the absolutely crucial point here is the massive juxtaposition between the network's framing and the actual events as described by the source. On one side, you have the media broadcasting a narrative of a dangerous, unhinged meltdown by a thin-skinned politician. But on the other side, the source presents a picture of incredible patience, a man enduring both a literal rainstorm and a figurative storm of bad faith questions before finally making a polite, controlled exit.
Moving right along to Section 5, the media disconnect, post-2016 doubling down.
Stepping back to look at the broader historical picture, the source argues that 2016 should have been a massive wake-up call. When Trump won, the media had this perfect opportunity for self-reflection. They could have stopped and asked, why are we so out of touch with the American people? But instead of doing that, the press allegedly did the exact opposite. They doubled down on their own worldview, completely reinforcing this tightly held belief that they are an enlightened class and anyone who disagrees with them is, well, just unintelligent. Because of this doubling down, the media is accused of obsessively chasing these sensational preferred narratives. Stories about downtrodden aliens, Islamists, or Nazis running for office, things that generate outrage and clicks. But the source frames this as a deliberate tactic, a distraction to avoid covering the much darker, more consequential real story right in front of them, massive government overreach and everyday lives being destroyed by an totally unaccountable system. The commentary really longs for an era of journalism that it believes is just totally dead today, bringing up legendary folks like Tim Russert. The source notes that, in the past, an interview was a fair fight. You knew it was fair because the journalist was equally tough on absolutely everyone. But today, the argument goes that modern journalists don't listen. They preach, they lecture. They aren't seeking answers at all. They're just executing a performance piece, perfectly designed for their own specific audience. And finally, Section 6, the demand for transparency, the ultimate goal. The overarching conclusion from this whole critique is that ultimate loyalty isn't actually to Donald Trump, or really to any specific politician. The loyalty is to the foundational concept of transparency itself. The demand is that every single institution holding power over your life, whether that's the press shaping the narrative, the election systems tallying your votes, or the federal government enforcing the laws, they must all operate in the full light of day. We, the citizens, must be able to see the mechanics of power and judge it for ourselves. She was not looking for the truth. She was looking to do a show. This quote just absolutely nails the source's entire sweeping critique of the interview. It brings us right back to that core idea of performance. By framing the journalist's motives as theatrical rather than inquisitive, the commentator is essentially invalidating the entire exchange as a piece of genuine journalism. And this is where the commentary hits its most ardent, serious note. It warns that by constantly lecturing the public and hiding behind these opaque narratives, the press is actively burning through the only fuel that democracy actually needs to survive: trust. Trust is viewed as the absolute bedrock. Once that trust burns out, the whole machine just grinds to a total halt. So we'll leave you with this final, really provocative thought from the commentary to consider. If interviews are just performances, and if institutions only operate in the shadows, how will future generations ever learn to find the truth for themselves? It's a profound challenge regarding media literacy and institutional power. Thank you so much for exploring this breakdown with us in today's Explainer. Keep asking questions and keep seeking the truth.